Well, Shalom, everyone, and welcome to our Shabbat night study. We are in lesson 7, and we are excited about the word that we're going to have on tonight. Let me shut this off, my music off, so that I don't get disturbed. And let me go shut one of these blinds because it's giving me a glare. I don't know why, but it is. All right. That's better. That glare was getting to me. I was like, that ain't gonna work. But in any case, we we are excited that we have the opportunity to have our lesson for tonight. And once again, I hope everyone had a nice Thanksgiving. Uh, we thank and praise Jehovah for allowing us another opportunity to come together and study the Word. And so this will be our last time, as we will be back in Georgia by next Friday. So we are excited about this word on tonight. I'm still trying to get used to uh, not having all my notes and everything around, not printing everything out, because I usually do that on Thursday. So without that, I find myself scrambling a little bit. But anyway, thank you so much for joining me. We're going to get through lesson 7, Vayeitze, on tonight, and we're going to have a great time. There's so many great nuggets that we're going to glean from our lesson. And I'm just excited. I'm excited because we get a chance to do it. Excited because I've had an opportunity to come and visit with my daughter and her sons, my son-in-law's family. And so we've been having a great time, and I've had to lock myself away so that I could study and prepare uh, for our session on tonight. So we're going to pray and then begin our lesson. Let me get this up here. I have to have some uh, extra notes because I don't have all my paperwork. So with that, let us pray. Jehovah our Elohim, we thank you for this day. This is the day that you have made, and we rejoice and we are glad in it. We thank you for this Shabbat night lesson that we use to get through the first 5 books of the Bible in one year. We thank you for the Ruach HaKodesh, the Holy Spirit that comes to guide us into all truth and open our hearts and minds to receive all that you will reveal to us tonight through your word. We bless you and praise you for Yeshua, HaMashiach, our Lord, Savior, and King. And in his name, we pray this prayer. Amen. All right. So with that, we are going to get into our shared screen and jump right in to our lesson. So let me move you a little bit over here. All right, I hope everything's okay. I don't see anything in the notes that would say it wasn't, so I hope you got a good view. And we are going to get into our slideshow presentation and begin our lesson. This is lesson 7 of Vayeitze, and it means he went. and we're going to get into the whole understanding of Yaakov or Jacob and how um, he has decided to leave. Remember, we found out some additional information from the book of Jubilees last week that Yaakov was not going to leave. Even though his mother had advised him to leave, he said, well, if we got to fight, we got to fight. But she said, he said he would only leave if his father requested him to leave. So with that, then Rebecca or Rebecca goes and convinces Isaac that that's what should happen. Isaac calls him in, blesses him, and tells him to go because he didn't want him to marry a woman from the land of Canaan. And so, with that, he goes on this venture to find a wife. Fascinating. He doesn't take all the camels and all the luxuries that uh, the servant of Abraham took when he went to the same land to get Rebecca. For Isaac, he went in a caravan. It's like Yaakov just up and leaves, even though his father had given him the leave to go, but he doesn't take a caravan or anything with him. He just goes by himself and heads for this land um, of the brother of Rebecca. And I found that was fascinating because all through our studies, Isaac kept getting more and more wealth, more and more servants, expanding his home just as Abraham did. And so it's amazing that he heads out on this journey, but he doesn't take soldiers or anything. He just oh, I lost someone. He just heads out. I hope she gets a chance to come back on. So I found that was fascinating, even as we get into this lesson for the night. I thought that was a fascinating aspect leading us into our lesson on tonight. And we know that in the Haftarah, which we normally would spend a whole class on from Hosea, and I'm not sure that word Hosea came from my notes. I think I made a change after I sent it, but I didn't send you the change. But anyway, it's the book of Hosea, chapter 12, verse 13 to chapter 14, verse. Let me get her back in. Where you at? All right, I'm gonna get you in. Wow. Okay, so that should get you back in. All right. Thank you. She got back in. All right. So, um, like I said, that to me was fascinating as we get into this lesson and get all the nuggets that we're going to get out of this lesson. It was just fascinating that he struck out on this journey basically just with some water. And I thought that was incredible. Neither his mother nor his father told him to take all the things he would need. Now, he's not a young man. He's close to 70 years old. And so it's just, to me, it was just amazing that he would go off on this journey on his own to this land where the brother Laban of Rebecca or Rivka lived. So we're going to get into our Haftarah and see, remember, that's the companion study. See the companion study in Hosea and see how that uh, is is an application for our lesson, Vayeitze, and he went. And so let's get into our Haftarah, which, starts in Hosea chapter 12, verse 13. Now, if you don't know anything about Hosea, he is one of the few prophets from the northern kingdom. All the other prophets that listed a place of their birth or something were from the southern kingdom, which remember was Judah and Benjamin, along with, of course, some of the Levite priests. And so Hosea has a fascinating life as he's told who to go marry and then do all of that. But this particular lesson, if you went to the book of Hosea and read it, but this particular lesson has to do with the Vayeitze, and he went. So it starts off in verse 13. Yaakov fled to the land of Aram, which is basically Haran, which was named after the brother of Abraham. And there it used the word Israel. Of course, at the time he went, that name hadn't been given to him. However, as this is recalled by the prophet, he uses the name Israel for Yaakov. Remember, Yaakov's name is going to be changed, and I believe that's next week's lesson. So it says, there Israel slave to win a wife. He did. He became a servant to win his wife. Uh, for a wife, he tended sheep. So he did this for 7 years, which we're going to learn on tonight. By a prophet, Jehovah brought Israel up from Egypt. Who is he talking about by that prophet? Of course, that would be Moses, Moshe or Moses. And by a prophet, he was protected. So now it's beginning to, like the angels that went to protect him along with the same value as a prophet. And so Ephraim has given bitter provocation. Now here's again, Ephraim did not exist at the time. When I say didn't exist, but he wasn't, it would have been just Joseph and not his two sons, but the prophet is relating to the people at that particular time who understood what he was saying. And for his bloodshed will be thrown down on him. Remember, that was the northern kingdom that went into such apostasy that finally the Assyrians came and ran them out of the land of the northern 10 tribes. When Ephraim spoke, there was trembling. He was a power in Israel. But when he incurred guilt through what? Baal worship, he died. Now, Baal worship is interesting because Baal was almost like this bull god, the goddess of the bull. And so here the prophet is basically saying through this particular situation, they then lost the favor of Jehovah and were removed by the Assyrians from the land. So now they keep adding sin to sin, casting images from their silver, idols they invent for themselves, all of them the work of craftsmen. We're going to get into some idols in our lesson tonight, which were the idols of Laban. Then we go on, all of them the work of craftsmen. Sacrifice to them, they say. Men give kisses to calves. In other words, they were basically doing idol worship in the northern kingdom, which you would have to read what took place when you go into the book of Kings and Chronicles. You'll see what the northern kingdom did. Therefore, they will be like a morning cloud. As we continue in this Haftarah, he says, like chaff blown by wind from the threshing floor. In other words, they were removed from the land, never to be brought back. It is believed by some that they were brought back in 1948 for when the land became Israel once again. However, in the prophecies about that situation, it primarily said they were going to be gathered by Yeshua. And so we'll just stick with that version for us. Still, he says, I am Jehovah your Elohim. So even though I've dispersed you all over the world, all over the known world at that time, um, it was the southern kingdom that went to Babylon that was brought back to the land of Israel because their time in Babylon was 70 years, and then they were allowed to return. He says, uh, and you don't know any God but me, or other than me, any Savior. So here he's basically saying, I am your Savior. He says, I knew you in the desert, in the land of terrible drought. When they were fed, they were satisfied. When satisfied, they became proud. And so this is the one thing we have to um, practically apply to ourselves. And it's basically something that continually happened to the children of Israel, as we read in the book of Judges. If you were to read that, you will see where they would sin and Jehovah would send a judge or a person to deliver them from their enemies. And then once they were delivered from their enemies, they would start feeling good about themselves and go right back into some more apostasy. He says, and therefore they forgot me. So that's what happened. So even when Jehovah blesses us, he is blessing us to be a blessing and not to get high-handed and think that we have done things on our own. Then in chapter 14, he says, Shamron, or this would be Samaria, will bear her guilt, for she has rebelled against her God. They shall fall by the sword. Their little ones will be dashed to pieces, and their pregnant women ripped open. Return, Israel, to Jehovah your Elohim, for your guilt has made you stumble. Take words with you and return to Jehovah. Say to him, forgive all guilt and accept what is good. We will pay instead of bulls the offerings of our lips. So we know that once the temple was destroyed, then when the kingdom was split into the northern kingdom, 10 tribes, southern kingdom, 2 tribes, when it was split, the temple existed. And so the whole reason that the northern kingdom, which later became known as Ephraim, um, separated itself completely from the southern kingdom was because of the temple. And the king at that time basically said that if I allow the people to go from the northern kingdom to the southern kingdom, which is just through a road, then they will kill me and there won't be a northern kingdom anymore. So therefore, he set up idols to Baal, or he basically went back to the time when the children of Israel made a calf or a bull to be their God, right after receiving the Ten Commandments on Mount Sinai. And so the prophet Hosea is telling them that that's why you were sent off. But like Jacob, you can do what? You can come back. But how do you have to do that? You have to do what? You have to repent, say that you're sorry, forgive all our guilt, and turn from your wicked ways. He said, and then, even though the temple no longer stands and you can't do animal sacrifice, you can still give sacrifices of praise. And so you can still keep the festivals and do those things, but instead of animal sacrifices, you, as a believer in Yeshua, give praise from your mouth to Yeshua and Jehovah the Father. And so in this particular companion study, it basically tells us something that we need to learn to deal with in given the conditions that we are in right now. And that is that as we learn more, as we turn more to Jehovah to reveal to us his word. That's what Yeshua said the Holy Spirit will come to guide us into all truth. Well, as we study the word, then we want to make certain that we allow the Holy Spirit to minister to us and to strengthen us to be doers and not just hearers of the word. So then when we get into the Haftarah from the Brit Hadasha or from the New Testament, it comes from John chapter 1, verses 43 through 51. And that companion study says, the next day, having decided to leave for Galilee, right there, we got what? Jacob deciding to leave and go to another land. Yeshua found Philip and said, follow me. Philip was from Bethsaida or Bethsaida, and the town where Andrew and Kepha or Peter lived. Philip found Nathanael and told him, we found the one that Moshe wrote about in the Torah, also in the prophets. It's Yeshua ben Yosef, or Yeshua, son of Joseph from Nazareth. So now they basically have, because he came to them from Nazareth and began to do works there first, then they began to think that that's where he was from, but he was born in Bethlehem. Nathanael answered him, Nazareth? Can any good come from there? Come and see, Philip said to him. Yeshua saw Nathanael coming toward him and remarked about him, here's a true son of Israel, nothing false in him. Nathanael said to him, how do you know me? Yeshua answered him, before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree. Now this fig tree is what? One of the names for what? Israel. And so it says, you were under the fig tree, I saw you. Nathanael said, Rabbi, you are the son of Elohim. You are the king of Israel. Yeshua answered him, you believe all this just because I told you I saw you under the fig tree? Well, this would give us an understanding of what? Prayer. And we know that in our lesson for today, we're going to see where Yaakov gets this dream and this vision and this word directly from Jehovah concerning his journey and his travels. And so basically, Nathaniel saying, man, I was praying, and this is what I was praying to get an understanding of Messiah and when he's going to come. So these Romans are messing us up. And Yeshua says he saw him there. And so Nathaniel quickly says, you are. No one else would know that other than Mashiach. He goes on to say, yes, indeed. Yeshua says, yes, indeed. I tell you that you will see heaven open and the angels of Elohim going up and coming down on the Son of Man. So basically, he's saying that what we take from this is in that lesson where it says Jehovah was at the ladder. Basically, he's saying, Yeshua saying, that was me, right? He's basically saying, I was the one that was there when the angels ascended and descended on in the vision that Yaakov had. And these are things that angels going up and down on the ladder would be something that all of these children of Israel were familiar with these stories because they studied these stories their whole lives. And that's how their lives evolved around the understandings that the rabbis gave them from the Torah and from the stories centered around the prophets and the writings. And so they were familiar with that. So that's kind of how our companion study relates to what we're going to study on tonight in this lesson titled Vayeitze. So with that, in the first part of our session, we go from Genesis chapter 28, verses 10 through 22. And we're going to see in that Jacob leaves what? Bathsheba, what we just talked about, and starts on his journey towards Haran. And there to his uncle Laban's home. When you look at your outline, you're going to see on there it talks about this place where he lay down was really Mount Moriah, or the place where the temple was later built. And so fascinating first part of our session. So let's read from verse 10 all the way to verse 15, and then we'll pick up verse 20 and read to verse 22. There is no companion words from the book of Jubilees or Enoch that we're going to use in this particular part of our session. Yaakov went out from Beersheba and traveled toward Haran. He came to a certain place and stayed the night there. See, that's what I'm saying. It's so amazing that he didn't have tents. He couldn't do anything like that. He's basically just traveling with the things he could carry. He said, because the sun had set, he took a stone from the place, put it under his head, and lay down there to sleep. Verse 12, he dreamt that there before him was a ladder resting on the ground with its top reaching to heaven, and the angels of Jehovah were going up and down on it. So you see, once again, this ladder we've studied up until this point in time, and understanding that these angels were not only for protection, but for what? Messengers from Jehovah that gave the word and the understanding and the prophetic utterances to the people of, especially those who were of the priestly line, for which we know Jacob is the descendant of Isaac, not Esau, but Jacob, that was going to maintain and continue the priestly lineage. Then suddenly Jehovah was standing there next to him, and he said, so you see what I was just talking about in John. What John is relating is that this Jehovah that we're talking about in verse 13 was actually Yeshua. And he said, I am Jehovah, the Elohim of Abraham, your grandfather, and the Elohim of Yitzhak. The land on which you are lying, I will give to you and to your descendants. Your descendants will be as numerous as the grains of dust on the earth. You will expand to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. By you and your descendants, all families of the earth will be blessed. We know that Jehovah first told that to Abraham, then to Yitzhak or Isaac. And now he's saying the same thing to Yaakov. Fascinating, because he's saying it at a time when, just like with Abraham, Yaakov doesn't have any descendants. He doesn't have any children. So he's giving him this continual promise. And at the time he's giving it to him, he doesn't have any children. So he's promising him that he will have descendants, many descendants, just as he did with Abraham and Isaac. And so we see the fascinating aspect of that is this man is 63 years, somewhere between 63 and 70, and told his mom he's never even considered marrying a woman from Canaan or anywhere else. He was basically studying and doing the things that what continue in the priestly line. Then we find that after he was told that, of course, Yaakov then basically says, truly, this is a place where Jehovah lives. And remember, this is Mount Moriah, where the temple will be built by Solomon at a later time. So all of this is being envisioned by Yaakov. We don't know whether or not he actually saw what Moses later saw and built, and then what Solomon took and built out of stone. So we don't know that, but we do know that Moshe was shown this same kind of a vision and told to make it just like he's going to be told to make it. Then Yaakov takes this vow. Once again, that's Jacob. If Elohim will be with me and will guard me on this road that I am traveling, giving me bread to eat and clothes to wear. That's fascinating. It's like he just got some temporary provisions, but nothing that will sustain him on this journey. So that I return to my father's house in peace, then Jehovah will be my Elohim. So by faith, he's doing this. Just like by faith, Abraham left to go. So we can see this transpiring once again, brought to memory in this particular lesson. Then he says, and this stone which he had laid his hand on, which I have set up as a what standing or a place to mark this existence, he said, this will be where what? Elohim's house is built, and everything you give me, I will faithfully return 1/10 to you. So just like Abraham, who would have told this story of him giving to Melchizedek a tenth, just like that, we see in this particular lesson that Yaakov or Jacob thinks about that and says, I will give a tenth to all that I have upon returning to the land and to this place. So that ends the first part of our session. And then we're going to go into the second part of our session where Yaakov or Jacob will continue on his journey and arrive at a well, very similar to the servant of Abraham and located on the outskirts of Iran. Could be the same well. Upon seeing Rachel, Laban's younger daughter, arriving with her father's sheep, Yaakov single-handedly is going to roll back a heavy rock that sat atop the well and gave water to her flock. Rachel told her father about the new arrival, and Laban rushes out to greet Jacob. I guess he did. He know what he got when his sister Rebecca left. So he being greedy, uh, runs out to meet him and say, "Come on in, man. Let's see what you got." But he don't have what the servant of Abraham had. He don't have 10 camels. He might have one. That's it. Then he goes on, and as we go from uh, chapter 29, we're going to pick up at verse 4, but if you read, you should have read 1 through 17. Yaakov said to them, my brothers, where are you from? They answered, we're from Haran, just like what transpired with the servant of Abraham. He asked them, do you know Laban, the grandson of Nahor? They said, we do. He asked them, are things going well with him? Yes, they answered. And here comes his daughter Rachel with the sheep. Normally the sheep were taken out by the men to take care of, but she is doing that preordained by Jehovah the Creator to go out and begin the manifestation of the children now of Yaakov. Look, there's still plenty of daylight left, and isn't time to bring the animal. It isn't time to bring the animals home. So water the sheep, then go and put them out to pasture. But they said, no, it's going to take some more of us. They answered, we can't, not until all the flocks have been gathered together. And they rolled the stone away from the opening of the well. That's when we water the sheep. So this has been their practice all this time. But Yaakov is smitten with Rachel, and he's like, No, she gonna water her sheep right now. Then she goes back and tells Laban what happened. Verse 13, when Laban heard the news of Yaakov, his sister's son, he ran to meet him. He hugged him and kissed him and brought him to his house. Yaakov told Laban all that had happened. Laban said to him, the same thing the servant did with Laban and his father back when Rebekah went to, was chosen to be the wife of Isaac. Once he gets through with the story, Laban said to him, you are indeed my own flesh and blood. After Yaakov had stayed with him for a whole month, Laban said to him, why should you work for me for nothing, just because you are my relative? Tell me how much I should pay you. Now Laban had two daughters. The name of the older was Leah, and the name of the younger was Rachel. Leah's eyes were weak. Primarily, that's probably dealing with the color. Not that she had needed, they didn't have glasses at that time or couldn't see, but most likely her eyes were not the brown of the most people's eyes. So she had different color eyes. But Rachel was good looking with beautiful features. So we'll learn if you read Jubilees, you would have found that Leah was beautiful, but her eyes were a different color. And that was considered a weakness because normally the people's eyes were the brown tone and usually a dark brown. So she wasn't ugly or anything. She was beautiful, but she wasn't the choice of Yaakov. And so with that, we're going to get into the third part of our session where we will pick up from the book of Jubilees more understanding of this period of time as we take in more information. So then we get into the third part of our session, and then it talks about how Yaakov asked Laban for Rachel to be his wife. Laban says, okay. He says, I'll work 7 years in exchange for her hand in marriage. Laban accepted the deal. And after 7 years, Yaakov says, okay, my time's up. Let me have Rachel. And so he gives a big feast, gets him drunk, and he finds out when he wakes up that that is Leah and not Rachel. Once again, the whole concept of Yaakov leaving was because one aspect of it was because of the fact that he took his brother's birthright with his father. Being the oldest, the birthright was to go to Esau. We went and studied that on last week. But Esau had given the birthright away, and then Esau was going to ignore that, as was Isaac. But there was intervention, and as it turned out, even though it wasn't positive, it was rooted in negativity. God is going to work that, or Jehovah will work that for good. And so the same thing is going to transpire in our lesson today. Then we're going to see where Leah is very fertile and she gives birth to four children: Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, the first of the four sons that she gave birth to at this time. And it's during this period of time, which would be what? The second 7 years. Remember, Yaakov worked 7 years for Rachel. We learned in our lesson last week that he started on this journey to get to Haran in the year, I believe it was 2022 or 21, 22. I'll see when I get back to Jubilees. But we see that 7 years would put him right around 2022. and or 21, 22, one of the two. We'll see when we get there. And so that would be the year that he consummates his marriage to Leah. During that first 7 days. He had to spend 7 days with her. Then she gets pregnant right away. But in the second week, he then marries Rachel. And since he's so much in love with her, he goes and basically spends all his time with her. And so then we'll see the interplay of all that's going on in our third part of our session, which is from chapter 29, verse 18, all the way to chapter 30, verse 13. So Jacob had fallen in love with Rachel and said, I will work for you 7 years in exchange for Rachel, your daughter. Laban answered, better that I give her to you than to someone else. Stay with me. So he agrees to the 7-year plan to work for him for the hand of Rachel. So Jacob worked 7 years for Rachel. It seemed only a few days to him because he was so much in love with her. Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, verse 21, since my time is finished. So we know that 7 years had passed, so that I can start living with her. Laban gathered all the men of the place and gave a banquet. So up until this point in time, he had never been with a woman. In the evening, he took Leah, his daughter, and brought her to Yaakov, and he went in and slept with her. Laban also gave his slave girl, Zilpah, to his daughter Leah as her servant girl or slave girl, it says here. But that really means like indentured servant girl. In the morning, Yaakov saw that he was with Leah, and he said to Laban. Now, many people say that's impossible. But we saw what happened, what? To the nephew of Abraham, Lot. And how his daughters got him filthy drunk, and he slept with them and didn't even know what had happened. So it is possible for that to transpire. What kind of thing is that? Is this that you've done to me? Same thing Esau said concerning Yaakov. He said, didn't I work for you for Rachel? Why have you deceived me? Laban answered, in our place, that isn't how it's done, to give the younger daughter before the firstborn. Finish the marriage week of this one, and we'll give you the other one also in exchange for the work you will do for me during yet another 7 years. So the same kind of deception that Yaakov had done with his father Isaac now has been done to him. And so now he's got to work a period of 7 more years in order to pay for Rachel, even though he could sleep with her in the second week after he spent a week with Leah. Chapter 30, verse 1, it says, when Rachel saw that she was not bearing children for Yaakov, she envied her sister and said to Yaakov, give me children or I will die. This made Yaakov angry at Rachel. He answered, am I in Elohim's place? He's the one who is denying you children. So this, after having some children, at least 3, perhaps 4 by Leah, then Rachel is now enraged that she don't have kids, but Yaakov is like, well, I've been sleeping with her, and every time I sleep with her, she has a child. So it's not me. Kind of reminds you of what? Sarah and Hagar. So we see the same interplay here that is transpiring. She then says, what does she say? Just like Sarah, Rachel says, here is my maid Bilhah. Go sleep with her and let her give birth to a child that will be laid on my knees. Now, that laid on my knees means that that child would actually be considered a child of Rachel, so that through her I too can build a family. So she gave him Bilhah, her slave girl, as his wife. And Yaakov went in and slept with her. Bilhah conceived and bore Yaakov a son. So right after he sleep with these women, they are all becoming pregnant. Rachel said, Elohim has judged in my favor. Indeed, he has heard me and given me a son. So therefore she called him Dan or Don, and meaning he judged. So we see that each one of these children are going to be given names, and these names are going to reflect the condition of them with their parents at that particular time. Fascinating, because it would appear that all of the women are primarily naming the children. With that, let's get into Jubilees and see additional information for this particular story of our third part of our session. Laban said to Yaakov, it is not done so where the younger marries before the elder. And it is not right to do this. For this is in Jubilees 28, verse 6. For thus it is ordained and written in the heavenly tablets. So basically, Laban is using uh, information that will be very familiar with Yaakov to justify what he has done. That no one should give his younger daughter before the elder, but the elder one, the one gives first, and after that, her younger. And the man who does so, so they set down guilt against him in heaven. So he's basically talking about the books that are recorded, the books of life that it has been taught all over, that are recording the deeds of men. He goes on to say, and none is righteous that does this thing, for his deed is evil before Yah. So he really explains to him in another way where all this, why this is necessary to transpire. And command thou the children of Israel that they do not this thing. Fascinating. That word from Jubilees, there was no children of Israel yet. So this was actually written, of course, much later than the event that took place. Let them neither take nor give the younger before they have given the elder, for it is very wicked. And Laban said to Jacob, let the 7 days of the feast of this one pass by, and I shall give thee Rachel, that thou mayest serve me another 7 years, that thou mayest pasture my sheep as thou didst in the former week. And on the day when the 7 days of the feast of Leah had passed, Laban gave Rachel to Jacob, that he might serve him another 7 years. And he gave to Rachel Bilhah, the sister of Zilpah. Zilpah was the maiden of Leah. So the two maidens were sisters, just like just like was Leah and Rachel. So these four women are sisters to some degree, and Yaakov is marrying the sisters, which normally wouldn't happen unless one of them died, or in fact, one of them could not bear children, which wasn't the case at all with Leah, but appeared to be the case with Rachel. And he served yet another 7 years, verse 10, for Leah. And for Leah had been given to him for nothing. I don't know why they put that in there, because she was for 7 years. And Yah opened the womb of Leah, and she conceived and bare Jacob a second son. And he called his name, Jacob a son. And he called his name Reuben on the 14th day of the ninth month in the first year of the third week. So this is 21-22. Well, if he arrived in the year 2115, not 2015, but 2115, then 7 years later, so right after he got married to Leah, she became pregnant, and in that same year had this first child, which was Reuben. We go to verse 12. But the room of Rachel was closed, for Yah saw that Leah was hated, and that word hated means loved or mistreated a bit more than, and Rachel was treated very well. And again, Jacob went into Leah and she bore a second son, and he called his name Simeon. And on the 21st of the 10th month, on the third year this week, so in 21-24. So normally there's a 3-year period where at least 2.5 for the other child to be weaned. But because all of this jealousy and discontent is going on, she's having her second son in the what? First one was 2020, 21, 22. So she's now having another child in like a little over another year, almost 2 years. She's having another child. And again, Jacob goes into her. She can see him bear him a third son. And he called his name Levi in the new moon of the first month of the 6th year this week, 21-27. So now we have what? A period of 5 years, and 3 children have been born to Leah in a period of somewhere around 5 years. Then it says, and again, Jacob went in unto her and she conceived. So every time he goes to sleep with her, because he spent primarily most of his time with Rachel, then she gets pregnant immediately and bore him a fifth son. And he called his name Judah. And so this is the year 21-29. So now there's been 7 years, and she's had 4 children in 7 years. So it's not even 2 years apart, because the first child was born in the first year. And so, on account of all this, Rachel then envied Leah, for she did not bear. And so that's where we get the whole understanding of her going to what transpired with her conversation in our lesson for today. Chapter 7, verse 17 says, when she saw that he had had 4 sons, Jake, Reuben, Simeon, Levi, and Judah, he said, then she brings Bilhah and says to her, sleep with her. What happens? He went into her and she bare him a son. So soon as he goes into these women, they get pregnant. And she called his name Dan, or what? Judge. On the ninth in the 6th month of the 6th year of the, so it was 21-27. And Jacob went in again to Bilhah a second time, and she conceived. So now this child was born in 2027, but there is more time that transpires before another son was born to her. So Rachel calls his name Naphtali. And then this was the year 21-30. So now there are 2 sons born to Bilhah and 4 sons. So there's 6 children in an 8-year period. And we go. So when Leah saw that she had become sterile, so now because he slept with her and she didn't get pregnant, she thinks she's sterile. And she then says, now she said, now I know what Rachel feels like. So then she gives her handmaid, Zilpah, who is the sister of Bilhah, right? Who has already had 2 children by Yaakov at this time. And what happens? Gad is born. And 21-31. So now we got 4, 6, 7 born in 9 years. And he went in again into her, she conceived, and bare a second son. And Leah called his name Asher. And this was 21-33. So at least it was a couple of years before he slept. And she got, whenever he slept with them, and of course, they were considered his wife, so he has to at some point spend some time with them. They got pregnant. And Jacob went in, then he goes into Leah, and she conceived and bare him another son. And this she called Issachar. And so now, this is 2132. Wait a minute. Asher was born in 2133 to Zilpah. But in the meantime, Jacob sleeps with her and she gets pregnant and gave birth to another son, Issachar. So now she's had 5 kids by Jacob directly. And Jacob went in again unto her, she conceived and bare 2 children. So now he's gone. Every time he sleeps with her again, she's getting pregnant. And this time he sleeps with her and she has a son, and later she has a daughter. And she called the name of the son Zebulun, and the name of the daughter was Dinah. So now she's had 6 sons by Jacob, and the 2 of of Zilpah, her maidservant. So now that's basically 8 of the children. And this is 2134. So by this time, probably almost the same week as the other one was, I mean, the same year the other one was born, because Dinah and Zebulun were not twins. And so they were born at least 9 months to a year apart. Then we find out that Yah was gracious to Rachel and opened her womb, and she, on the moon of the 4th month in the 6th year in the 4th, in 2134, she has a child. So now we're looking at basically 12 years. She has a child and calls him Joseph. So he's completed 7 years for Rachel, and almost completed his 7 years for Leah, and almost completed his 7, because remember it was 2022 when he married Rachel and had his first child. So then after Joseph is born, he says, all right, I'm ready to go. Time for me to get up out of here. But remember, by the time this comes up, it would have had to be 2136 or 37, because he had to have completed the 7 years for Rachel, because that would be 14 years. And then we got 2022 is the time he actually married Leah. And so that would be 14 years. So Joseph would be right around almost 2 years old when he says, I'm ready to get up out of here. However, Laban says, tarry with me for thy wages, pasture my flock for me again, and take thy way. So in other words, he's saying, you don't want to go away penniless. Right now, you have nothing. You got all these children, you got wives, but you don't have no animals. You can't take care of them. So he basically convinces him to stay and work dealing with sheep and goats, so that he would have something to take care of his grandchildren and his daughters. And they agreed. And he will give his wages, basically lambs that are blemished. They won't get a whole lot according to the way things normally happen. But of course, an angel tells Jacob what to do, and Jacob does that, and speckled and spotted sheep are becoming the normal with those sheep that Jacob is taking care of. So with that, we get into the 4th part of our session, where we get a little bit more insight into the, even though we covered it in Jubilee in terms of getting the time sequence to see how many children were being born in a very short period of time. Now we'll go back and read from our text today in Genesis, verses 14 through 27, um, how this situation evolved even a little more to how Leah conceived and began to, after she thought she was sterile, began to have these other two children. During the wheat harvest season, when Reuben went and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. So he's only about 5 or 6 years old when this happens, when this takes place. Please give me some of your son's mandrakes, Rachel says, so that I can be fertile. He answered, isn't it, meaning Leah says, isn't it enough that you have taken away my husband? Do you have to take my son's mandrakes too? Rachel, so evidently these mandrakes were some type of aphrodisiac. Rachel said, very well, in exchange for your son's mandrakes, sleep with him tonight. All right. And when Jacob came in from the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, you have to come and sleep with me because I've uh, hired you with my son's mandrake. So Jacob slept with her that night. Elohim listened to Leah, and she gave birth to a fifth son. Leah said, Elohim has given me my hire because I gave my slave girl to my husband. So she called him Issachar, which means a reward. All right. Then she says Leah conceived again and bore a sixth son to Yaakov. We read about that in Jubilees. And this time she named him Zebulun, mean living together or together we are this big family. Now she has a sixth son by Yaakov. After this, she gave birth to a daughter named Dinah. So we know that Leah had six sons, the two sons of Zilpah, that makes eight, and at least a ninth child that was Dinah. These are all the children of Leah, or of course, adding the two to Zilpah. After this, she gave birth to and named her daughter Controversy over some discussion that they were having. After Rachel had given birth to Joseph, Yaakov said to Laban, send me on my way so that I can return to my own country and let me take my wives for whom I have served you and my children and let me go. You know very well how faithfully I served you. And we covered that as we completed our additional information in Jubilees. With that, we're going to get to there is no Jubilee portion for this, but we will get into Jubilee portion in the fifth part of our session. In the fifth part of our session, which goes from chapter 30, verse 28, all the way to 31:16, we're going to find out in the fifth part where Yaakov, then basically Joseph's been born, probably just about been weaned, and his 14 years or the 7 years for working for Leah is up. Then we get into where they discuss that he's going to need some cattle and things like that to take and supply them. Once again, it's fascinating because we know that his father was very rich. So I don't quite understand, other than we see the hand of Jehovah bringing about this scenario, um, transferring what was was meant for evil to good. Because in this situation, all of these children are being born, and even though there is this contention, they're very close in age, and so um, that situation is being turned into good, even though there was all this dissension going on. So we'll then see that they agreed for another 6 years, which would get us to nearly 20 years, just 20. He's had 11 children by 4 women in a span of 14 years. So we can see that's quite out of the norm, but it's part of the hand of Jehovah working in terms of futility, fruitfulness of these women. So then they make this deal. Jacob replied, then a few how faithfully I have served you and all your livestock have prospered under my care. The few you had before I came have increased substantially. Jehovah has blessed you wherever I went. But now, when I will provide for my own household, but now, when will I provide for my own household? Laban says, what should I give you? Nothing, answered Yaakov. Just do this one thing for me. Once more, I will pasture your flock and take care of it. I will also go through the flock and pick out every speckled, spotted, or brown sheep and every speckled or spotted goat. These and their offspring will be my wages. Remember, these animals in the understanding of Yaakov would basically not be what? For sacrifice because they can't have a spot or a blemish. Yet and still, he's taking this upon himself to give him what? Food that animals that he can use to feed this large family that he has. Laban then replies in verse 34, as you have said it, so be it. So then basically Laban takes all of anything with a blemish, he takes away and only leaves animals that have no blemish and tells them, okay, you handle those. And from those, anything that comes out spotted will be yours. But anything already got a spot or something on it, he takes that and puts that away from these other animals. Then Yaakov figures out, in Jubilee, it lets us know that an angel came and gave him the information that he would need to increase the stock. But since Yaakov had done all this work and Laban had treated him so badly, then most of the livestock that are born that he handles come out spotted and speckled. If you read the words in this fifth part of our session, you'll see he put some branches there and cut those spots in them, and the animals made it, and they came out spotted or speckled. And anything that didn't wasn't as strong as the spotted or speckled. Once then, he says in chapter 31, when they heard that Laban's son, when he heard that Laban's sons were saying, so the sons are saying, look, no matter what we do to this guy, he prospers. So we need to get rid of him. He goes on, they go on and say, Jacob has taken away everything that our father once had. No, he didn't. His father took it away from Yaakov. But then the animals, as they were mating, became spotted or speckled. It's from what used to belong to our father that he's gotten so rich. So they jealous and greedy, just like their father. He also saw that Laban regarded him differently than before. So Jehovah then tells Yaakov, return to the land of your ancestors, to your kinsmen. I will be with you. So Yaakov sent for Rachel and Leah and had them come to the field where his flock was. He said to them, I see by the way your father looks that he feels differently toward me than before. But the Elohim of my father has been with me. You know that I have served your father with all my strength, and that your father has belittled me and has changed my wages 10 times. But Elohim did not allow him to do me any damage. So in this, in this, we see that they agree, the daughters agree that basically they're not going to get in. If their father is treating Jacob the way he says that he's being treated, which they probably understood their father a lot better, then Jacob originally did, then in fact, their whole lives are centered around what Jacob could provide for them. Nowhere in here does he talk about the riches of his father and that he is the heir to his father's riches. That doesn't even enter into the conversation at any point because he could have just taken his family and worked for some camels and stuff like that and took off and not had to work 6 more years. Then we're going to get into some information we get from Jubilees where it says um, concerning the information in the fifth part of our session. And it came to pass when Rachel had borne Joseph that Laban went to shear his sheep, for they were distant from him a 3 days' journey. Remember, he took all his sheep, even the speckled ones, 3 days away from Joseph. But yet and still, because of the information that Jacob had been given, and Jacob saw that Laban was going to shear his sheep. Jacob called Leah and Rachel and spoke kindly unto them that they should come with him to the land of Canaan. For he told them how he had seen everything in a dream, and even all that he had spoken unto him that he should return to his father's house. When he talks about that he's basically talking about Jehovah, or what we learned from John was Yeshua. And they said, to every place whither thou goest, we will go with thee. Verse 4, and Jacob blessed the Elohim of Isaac, his father's father. And he arose and mounted his wives and his children. So he gave praise to Jehovah because Jehovah said, okay, now return. Now remember, he promised to bring him back safely and peacefully to this land. But Yaakov still thinks it's best to go while he's away. Laban is away. Best to sneak away in. Jacob blessed Elohim of Isaac, his father's father, which means Abraham, and he arose and mounted his wives and his children, and took all his possessions and crossed the river and came to the land of Gilead. And Jacob hid his intention from Laban and told him not. So he left without telling Laban anything. And in the 7th year of the 4th week, Jacob turned his face toward Gilead in the 1st month of on the 21st thereof, 21:35. And Laban pursued after him and overtook Jacob in the mountain of Gilead in the 3rd month, on the 13th thereof. So we see then that in the year 2135, Jacob heads back. Jacob heads back. Something's not going on. I'm getting ready to lose my power. Hold on. Let's see if that works. So anyway, uh, he's going back to, we'll get into this, to the land of Canaan. And now we know that he's near Gilead when we get this information. So now we're going to go into the 6th part of our session where we're going to find from chapter 31, verse 17 to verse 42, where in the 6th part, it gets into how he left and what happened and how Laban caught them and what transpired. So now Laban had gone to shear his sheep, so Rachel stole a household idol that belonged to her father. That is amazing, and that's why we highlighted it. Why did she do that? And there's many speculations concerning that, but the scriptures are not clear as to exactly why she did that. So he fled with everything he had. He departed, crossed the Euphrates River. So where in Jubilees it talked about he crossed the river. Now we know it was the Euphrates River, and set out for the hill country of Gilead. Now, not until the 3rd day was Laban told that Yaakov had fled. Laban took his kinsman with him and spent the next 7 days pursuing Yaakov, overtaking him in the hill country of Gilead. So remember, he was a 3-day journey away from them shearing the sheep, but he had left spies. When the spies recognized that Yaakov or Jacob was gone and had taken the family and his daughters and his wives with him, then they take 3 days to get to Laban because it was a 3-day journey. And so after that, Laban then come and spent the next 7 days pursuing Yaakov and catches up to him in Gilead. But Elohim came to Laban the Aramean in a dream that night and said to him, be careful that you don't say anything to Yaakov, either good or bad. So now he knows, Jehovah knows the intent of Laban is not good. So then he sends an angel to remind Yaakov, remind Laban that he better not touch Yaakov, the daughters, the animals, nothing that he has. And Laban will reveal that even as the story goes. When Laban caught up with Yaakov, Yaakov had set up camp in the hill country. Remember Gilead. So Laban and his kinsmen set up camp in the hill country of Gilead as well. So he had some people with him. Laban said to Yaakov, what do you mean by deceiving me and carrying off my daughters as if they were captives taken in war? Why did you flee in secret, deceive me, and not tell me? I would have sent you off with joy and singing to the music of tambourines and lyres. He goes on to say, in verse 30, he says, granted that you had to leave because you longed so deeply for your father's house. So now he got a whole lot he wants to say and do, but the angel had warned him. And once again, he had idols. So he believes in some form of a higher being, even if it's a wooden idol. So he understands what has transpired. And he doesn't want to violate that because he has to go back to his own land. And basically what the people believed is wherever they were living, there were angels that protected them in that area that they would pray to and and make idols of. And so they understand that there is a higher being. But he also understood that he was warned not to touch him. All right. But he said, I know you wanted to get away. So Yaakov then answered Laban. He said, but why did you steal my gods? Now Yaakov gets angry. Because I was afraid. I said, suppose you take your daughters away from me by force. But if you find your gods with someone, that person will not remain alive. This is a most crucial thing that we will see in the next 2 weeks, next 2 lessons that we serve, because we're going to find that Rachel, who did take the statues, dies on the way back to the land of Isaac in Canaan. So with that, we complete the sixth part of our lesson, and we will complete our lesson, basically the seventh part, which is from chapter 31, verse 43, all the way to chapter 32, verse 3. Laban answered Yaakov, the daughters are mine. So you see, his intention wasn't good. What Jacob said he would do was really what his intentions were, but he couldn't do it. The daughters are mine, the children are mine, the flocks are mine, and everything you see is mine. But what can I do today about these daughters of mine or the children they have borne? So now, come, let's make a covenant, I and you, and let it stand as a testimony between me and you. Yaakov took a stone and set it upright as a standing stone. Then Yaakov said to his kinsmen, gather some stones. And they took stones, made a pile of them, and ate there by the pile of stones. Laban called it Egar Shahaduta, pile of witnesses, and speaking what? Aramaic, while Yaakov called it Gal Ed, like almost Gilead, or pile of witness in Hebrew. Laban said, this pile of witnesses between me and you today. This is why it is called Gal Ed. So now he calls it after the God in the language, rather Hebrew, of the God of Jacob or Jacob. He goes on to say, this power witnesses between me and you today. This is why it is called Galed, and also Amitzpah, or the watchtower, because he said, may Jehovah or Adonai watch between me and you when we are apart from each other. If you cause pain to my daughters, or if you take wives in addition to my daughters, then even if no one is there with us, still Elohim is witness between me and you. Laban also said to Yaakov, here is this pile, and here is this standing stone, which I have set up between me and you. Early in the morning, Laban got up, kissed his sons and daughters, and blessed them. Then Laban left and returned to his own place. Yaakov went on his way, and the angels of Elohim met him. When Yaakov saw them, he said, this is Elohim's camp, and called that place Mahanayim, or two camps. All right, so that basically concludes our lesson for today. Remember when he left, he had seen the angel and Yeshua and saw them ascending and descending, been told that he would be brought back to the land and that he would come back in peace. His peace was, Laban had other ideas, but the word of Jehovah stood, and Laban could do nothing, even though his intentions was to basically kill Yaakov and take everything he had back to his own land. But because he had that dream and those angels appeared to him, he was basically like, ain't nothing else I can do. But I want to put this here so that you and I will not pass these stones with bad intentions. I will not come to you with bad intentions, and you will not come to me with bad intentions. And this power will be a reminder that we will live in peace. And it's the peace that Jehovah said he would grant him on this journey. So we learn in our lesson so much concerning all that transpired in this 20-year period. It was only 20 years, but in 20 years, he had 11 children. Remember, the first 7, he had no wives. But after that, the next 14 years, 13 or 14 years, he had basically 13 years, he had 4 wives and 11 children in 13 years. Well, 11 sons. Remember, he also had at least one daughter. So he actually had a minimum 12. Doesn't talk about any of the other daughters being born, but Dinah is going to play a very vital part in this story of Yaakov later. And so, with that, I don't see any questions or concerns. So, with that, that completes our lesson for tonight. So, we're going to do our priestly blessing, and then we're going to leave for the night. Let me bring that up. Okay, we point our hands towards each other. May Jehovah bless you and keep you. May Jehovah make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May Jehovah lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. And with that, shalom I'll see you next week for lesson 8 in our journey through the Torah in 1 year. Shalom